not an American historian by training. I'm an art historian. And I think about art and art practice, objects in art practice, from the point of view of how they define contemporary culture. When I think about history before 1970, it's on an as-needed basis. It's on how it helps me identify our contemporary life. But until I became the director of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center, I, like many of you, understood American history through the canon. That meta-narrative that defines for us who we are. The way in which we move towards our democratic will, if you will. A series of high watershed moments that let us know who we are. But we're in a revisionist moment now. For all of you who didn't know that, we are in a revisionist moment. And we're thinking about things like our slave narratives and our civil rights histories. And as a consequence of that thought, we're realizing that the canon is limited. It's not giving us all the information that we need to have about the growth of our American democratic will. But we're lucky that we live in Charlottesville, because the micro-narrative in Charlottesville allows us to think about American history from a quotidian point of view, from the daily advancement of people's lives. More specifically, having the Jefferson School in our midst allows us to think, and that is being the African American School from 1865 to 1951, allows us an opportunity to consider our modern history. It's 100 years of American history written in that building. So I'd like to start at its beginning. And I'd like to offer you a new narrative, a different narrative, a narrative that says that we can look at the quotidian, the everyday, so that when we think about things like the end of slavery, or the Depression, or Brown versus Board of Ed, I'd like to offer that the history that the Jefferson School articulates for us allows us a different way of thinking of our democratic will. In 1867, Isabella Gibbons wrote to the Freedmen's Aid Society. I began my school on October 3rd with 42 scholars. The sphere into which I have been put by your kindness is so different from slavery. I hardly know what steps to take. But, following Miss Gardner's exact rule, I read a chapter in the Bible, choosing the 83rd Psalm, which I thought was suitable for the times. Slavery, the sphere that I find myself in now, so much better than slavery. 83rd Psalm, suitable for the times. We have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And what do we understand from the words written here? Well, we all know Psalms. All of us know the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But the 83rd Psalm, what's that? And when she talks about the fact that she makes a conscious decision to teach this psalm in the way of Miss Gardner being the white abolitionist teacher who comes down from New England to start the Jefferson School, what does that mean? What we know is that doing it Miss Gardner's way means that you learn it over and over until you get it right. Now, I know what that means because I can sing every song from the musical Oklahoma, which I learned in the 3rd grade at PS 169. And I can do it for you. Couldn't pick a better time to start in life. It ain't too early, it ain't too late. Starting as a farmer as a brand new wife, soon be living in a brand new state. So, what does that mean to learn something in your DNA, to inculcate that into your very being? Because that's what it means to learn it over and over. Oklahoma, where the wind goes seeking down the swains. And what are the times that we're talking about? What is suitable of the times? So in 1867 is the ratification of the 14th Amendment. Those are the times. And that amendment was created in relationship to black laws that were created in 1865, 1866, that essentially restricted the movement of African American people. So here is the 83rd Psalm, very quickly. Keep thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be or may no more in remembrance, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. So persecute them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, what they may seek thy name, Lord. What do we learn from Isabella Gibbons? Well, I'll tell you what I learned from her. I learned that the movement to the democratic will, the movement from object to subjecthood, is what causes us to understand who we are as Americans. And it's the daily, everyday, quotidian struggle of everyday people that really identifies who we are. I'll take you 65 years later to 1926. This is a watershed moment in our local history, and also a watershed moment in American history, because in 1926, the Jefferson School High School is built. And what that means is that until the building of the high school, African American people only had education to the 7th grade. If they wanted more education, they had to be taken away. Let's think about that for a minute, because what that means is you have money. So the building of a high school in this town, what does it do? It democratizes education. It means that African American people living in this town all can have education, right? But I want to talk about a bigger watershed moment, 1929, 1930, because that's the moment that the Jefferson School becomes accredited. And accreditation is defined in a Norfolk newspaper as the greatest advancement in African American education since Reconstruction. Think about the times again, 1929, 1930. We are on the brink of the Depression. Up until this moment, most of the education offered in the South for African American people are trade schools. White abolitionists are coming down and they're spending money, Rosenwald Fellows, all of that, spending money to create training schools. We're on the brink of depression. If you're a student who's graduating from the Jefferson School in 1931, you're entering a work market in 1934. What does accreditation say about the will to democracy? What it says is that it standardizes education. What it says is it's a classical education. And while not everyone who graduates from the Jefferson School is on its way to college, at least we're in a space quite different from most of the South. Charlottesville can boast that it had, at this moment, one of 9 other accredited high schools, all of the others located in much larger locales. If you went to the Jefferson School between 1926 and 1951, essentially, you started out at a graded school, and you walked the few steps over to the high school. After 1951, you went to Jefferson Elementary School, and then you went to the Jackson P. Burley High School. But ultimately, what you did was you went to school with your cousins, your sisters. Your teachers were your mothers or your fathers. It was a closed unit. It was a closed social network. Fast forward to 1958, 59. Charlottesville is one of the areas that participates in massive resistance and closes its schools for 1 year in reaction to a Brown versus Board of Education decision that happens in 1953. But what we understand about this 1958-1959 moment that we define as a watershed moment is that integration of Charlottesville schools does not actually happen until 1967. And Charlottesville plods along in its integration of its schools. And in fact, the Jefferson School is never itself integrated. What actually happens is that whites have an opportunity to opt out of going to the Jefferson School. They have an opportunity to receive vouchers. And so in reality, our notion of integration doesn't begin in 1953. It doesn't begin in 1958. It actually begins in 1965, spurred on by the 1964 Civil Rights Amendment. So, I ask you, how do you understand your democratic will now? Is it really those high watershed moments of actions by extraordinary people in extraordinary time? Or is it the daily advancement of people as they move through their quotidian lives? And that the events that we seem to think that are not so important really do, in fact, advance our democratic will. So, how do we understand who we are as Americans? What is it that I'm trying to tell you? What is it that a conversation through the lens of African American life and African American people say about us? How do we view the relationship that we are asked to understand as Americans? Thank you.